Hello and welcome to This Week in Racing. I'm David Land. We've got a vast swath of topics to talk about today, covering IndyCar, Formula One, NASCAR, and even sports cars this week in racing. Let's get into it right away. So let's start out by talking about the IndyCar finale at Laguna Seca, the first time they've raced there since 2004 under the Champ Car banner, and as you are hopefully well aware, this is where they are going to determine the championship, and we're going to talk a little bit about the championship right now. So it is a double points event at Laguna Seca, so that allows 4 drivers, Joseph Newgarden, Alexander Rossi, Simon Pagenaud, and Scott Dixon, each with a mathematical shot at the championship. Newgarden's, of course, the points leader and has a sizable advantage over Alexander Rossi and Simon Pagenaud, who have scored Rossi or are out of the championship. Rossi is by 41 points. Pagenaud is out of the championship by 42 points. Now, Scott Dixon is an incredible long shot in 4th in the championship with 85 points out. Now, the only reason he's really into the championship at all, and really the only reason any of these drivers are really into the championship at this point or got a real shot at it, is because of the double points and because of the fact that between first and last, meaning 24th position, there's a potential 98-point swing. Now, that includes a bonus point for the pole position and bonus point for being a lap leader and 2 bonus points for most laps led, but there is the potential that it could swing 98 points if Newgarden finishes last, Dixon wins the race, gets pole most laps, and leads a lap of the race. So, I think it's a definite outside shot that anyone is going to beat Newgarden. I think Newgarden will drive a very conservative race. But again, this is something that you guys can definitely discuss in the comments. Who do you think has the best shot at the IndyCar Championship? And this was a fairly shocking thing that broke, especially considering some of the things we were just talking about maybe a week or 2 ago about the Formula One silly season. Haas F1 has retained Romain Grosjean to pair with Kevin Magnussen at their team for the 2020 season. This was surprising because it seemed like for the longest time Grosjean was out and potentially Nico Hulkenberg was going to take his seat after being ousted from Renault in favor of Esteban Ocon. Now, Nico Hulkenberg does have some Formula One options. Williams is probably the best one right now, or the most open seat, because, of course, Robert Kubica just decided that he is not going to pursue a Formula One seat in 2020, or at least with Williams, and it would be unlikely that he'll return to the grid at all. So there's a potential that Hlkenberg could go to Williams. There's also a possibility, very outside, that he could go to Alfa Romeo Racing, though it seems like Antonio Giovinazzi will stay in that seat. Now, one of the interesting things, and one of the things that I even thought of immediately following the announcement that Hlkenberg was a free agent was, hey, maybe he could go to IndyCar. Well, Will Buxton did some digging on this and actually came up with the answer. Nico Hulkenberg does not want to do IndyCar racing because of the fact that there are oval tracks in IndyCar, and for whatever reason, Nico Hulkenberg does not feel comfortable running the ovals. Fair play to him. But one of the other things that Will Buxton brought up was that Zach Brown has spoken or tried to reach out to Nico Hulkenberg to sign him to his IndyCar program, McLaren, for next year. Of course, that's when he got the answer that Hlkenberg was not interested because of the ovals, but that also opened up a follow-up question from Will Buxton, which brought on the fact that Zach Brown is taking a very serious look at Connor Daly, especially this weekend, to fill a seat at the McLaren IndyCar team. Of course, Connor Daly is racing this weekend at Laguna Seca for Andretti Autosport with Air Force backing, so it'll be interesting to see, and I think a lot of people, myself included to be honest with you, think that Connor Daly is one of the best fits possible for that McLaren seat. We assume at this point there's only one open, though there's a question about James Hinchcliffe and whether he's actually going to stay there or not still, but we're just going to have to wait and see how that all turns out. At the moment, Connor Daly looking like a front runner right now to join McLaren. IMSA President Scott Atherton has announced his retirement. He was president of IMSA for 20 years, including a tenure in the American Le Mans Series, and then helped facilitate the merger between the American Le Mans Series and Grand Am, which was owned at the time by NASCAR. Both series, once they merged, are now under the NASCAR banner, but Atherton stayed on to help lead the series and guide it into the first few years of the merger, and quite frankly did a pretty good job. And I think a lot of people who don't follow sports cars don't really realize what a huge deal this is that Scott Atherton is leaving. So I'll explain it a little bit. First, I'll talk about some of his legacy. Leading the ALMS through some of the glory days, I would implore anybody to go watch the races in the American Le Mans Series from about 2006 to 2010. Some of the best sports car racing you'll ever see. And then when the economy crashed in 2008, a lot of the factory teams like Porsche, Audi left the sport. And so it made it very difficult for that series to continue because at that point it was very reliant on manufacturers. But Atherton was able to make some changes to the product that kept it going all the way up until the point in 2012 when they announced the merger with Grand Am. And then had the leadership capabilities to make that merger a hell of a lot better and more beneficial to most people, in my opinion, than the kart IRL merger ever was. I think really they turned the Grand Am ALMS merger into something that was the best of both worlds. Now, certainly there were some serious wrenches thrown in, especially in the 2014 season, which was one of the worst seasons of racing ever as far as I'm concerned. It was really ugly. It was not fun to watch. But here's the thing, is that Atherton had a pretty good understanding of being able to balance fans, manufacturers, and the competitors themselves, and be able to produce a product that was acceptable for pretty much everybody, or at least a crowd-pleasing one. Especially look at something like DPI, which somehow has managed to, for the most part, please the old hardcore fans like myself of the American Le Mans Series who wanted to see fast, high-tech prototypes, satisfied the manufacturers by allowing there to be some differentiation between the cars at a low cost point, but also having some road car tie-ins, and then again with the teams you have the cost savings, and then some of the old Grand Am fans, you still call them Daytona prototypes, and they still retain some of the incredible racing that we saw from the original tube frame Daytona prototypes. But here's why this is so significant. All these things I've talked about that have been juggled by Atherton for this long are now no longer going to be juggled by Atherton. And I have been noticing in the last couple of years, or at least especially this year, and this is just based on kind of what I've been able to observe. I'm not necessarily pronouncing doom and gloom, and I don't want that to turn into this. But I would say that there does seem to be a bit of a transition going on in IMSA. A lot of teams are starting to move away for whatever reason. They're going to SRO or maybe going to WEC or ELMS. It seems like some teams are struggling, especially two. We're seeing some GTLM teams start to leave. We know Ford's going to leave next year. As well as, some crowd-pleasing cars are changing next year. The Porsche and the Corvette, which are so loud and fan-favorite-y because of that, they're going to be much quieter next year. From quite a bit of perspectives, kind of like what I was just talking about, that balancing act. I think the fans are maybe going to be less enthusiastic about the product next year. I think, obviously, there's some manufacturers leaving, and there's some teams leaving. So there's going to be some choppy waters for IMSA going forward, especially considering that they supposedly are going to have a new prototype formula in 2021, which is going to introduce hybrids, kind of similar to what IndyCar is doing. In fact, I should reiterate that IndyCar is similar to what IMSA is doing because IMSA did it first. But DPI 2.0 is going to be a whole new world, especially considering that one of the core tenets of Atherton's reign was he kind of wanted to stay at an arm's length from stuff that the ACO was doing with the WEC and LMP1. I wonder if his successor will have those same feelings. I wonder if DPI 2.0 is essentially going to be an American version of hypercar rather than its own thing like it is now. I don't know. There's going to be some big changes going forward in American sports car racing. I hope they're all good, and I hope whoever they place as the president of IMSA is just as good, if not better, than Scott Atherton. But I think it's going to be a very high mountain to climb. And finally, this was pretty big NASCAR silly season news that Tyler Reddick is replacing Daniel Hemric in the number 8 car for Richard Childress Racing after only 1 year in the Cup Series for Daniel Hemric. Of course, Reddick was the Xfinity Series champion last season, but I think a lot of people are pretty upset about this, as usually seems to happen with stuff involving Richard Childress Racing. Okay, so, yeah, I mean, you can obviously have that generic response that a lot of people have, and even I kind of, had that visceral response is like, oh, it's Rich Children Racing, oh, it's, why don't you fire Austin Dillon? Oh, wait, it's because, but, it is a business, and I understand from that perspective. Look, you need some sponsorship. Apparently, they were open, as reported by Adam Stern, they were open to bringing a third car back full-time to accommodate Hemric and keep him in the team, and it just didn't work out. Reddick clearly has backing, and currently he has a championship, which Hemric doesn't have. That being said, I remember observing a race a couple of years ago that Hemric was in at Dover. That was an Xfinity race, and I really was impressed with what I saw from him. I can't really put my finger on it, but you just kind of know, if you're kind of a seasoned observer of races, you can kind of look at a driver in amongst the pack of other drivers and just be able to point to that guy and say, that guy knows what he's doing. And I kind of had that feeling with Daniel Hemric, and I've always felt that he's deserving of a Cup ride. And like I said, it's really disappointing that after only 1 year, he gets the boot for somebody else. Apparently, again, this was reported by Adam Stern, the 95 car, which of course eventually went to Matt DiBenedetto with Levine Family Racing, was looking at signing Hemric for this year. But of course, as Stern pointed out, that would have only been a 1 year deal too. It's disappointing because you look at the options that Hemric has for next year, they're not great. I know there's a rumor that he might go to Germain Racing. I mean, I just don't see him replacing Ty Dillon, especially considering that Germain is a satellite program to RCR. And RCR, let's be honest here, it hasn't been a very good year for them, considering that a lot of their satellite cars are performing at or above their level. I mean, sometimes they're getting outrun by Richard Petty Motorsports, and we know that the state that team is in. So from that perspective, it's not a great seat, but at the same time, where is Hemric going to end up? I would probably guess he's going to go back to the Xfinity Series, Ross Chastain style, even though Ross Chastain was Xfinity to trucks, but whatever. I don't know. I don't see any future plans for him in trucks, maybe, or in Cup. Maybe he could try to mount another championship charge, get that championship, and maybe move back up into Cup. I don't know. But I know a lot of people are going to be very upset about Richard Childress Racing because that's just always seems to be how it goes. So that was This Week in Racing. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below about any of the topics I covered today, or maybe some of the topics that I didn't talk about. Let me know down there. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Subscribe for more motorsport content, and I will see you in the next video.